Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to RVA Tech's Tech It Yourself webinar series, where today we're going to be talking about the head of product role and giving you some insight on how to propel your career forward. My name is Lori Jennings. I am the founder of Jennings Pro Search, which is a tech executive recruiting firm, and I'm thrilled to be joined by two special guests today who are co-organizers of RVA Tech's, or not RVA Tech's, of the Product Bank. Jessica Ellison, product manager for CarMax, and Travis Brooklyn, product manager from Capital One. They're going to help me get this going interactive in the chat room like they do in the product tank. So I'm going to start by asking a series of questions of the panelists, and the whole time Travis and Jessica are be making comments. Y'all please feel free to do so. Put your chat questions in there, and we'll be getting to those probably after the first 30 minutes because we really want to hear what you want to know. So welcome, Travis and Jessica, and thanks so much for being here. All right, I'm going to introduce the panelists today. We've got Milgo Yanis, who is the Chief Product Officer at TMI Consulting, which is a diversity and inclusion consulting firm. We have William DeVar, Chief Product Officer at West Creek, a fast-growing point-of-sale financing provider for retailers. And then Matt Briggs is VP of Product at Capital One, and I think everyone here knows what Capital One is. I guess it's a bank holding company that does credit cards, loans, and everything else. Welcome, and thank you for being here. I want to start off by letting each of you talk about your journeys to getting to the role you are now. So why don't we start with you, Milgo?
Hi. So I've had an interesting experience, I think, arriving at this juncture in my life. I have a design background, so I never necessarily thought I was going to end up doing diversity and inclusion work in this world we live in today. So this was kind of a surprising turn of events for me, at least. But it's been such an incredible place to work and such an incredible kind of topic to work within, especially, right now, as we look at a world that is, growing in its own understanding of what diversity and inclusion is and what it means to actually capitalize on that as a possibility for products, for understanding how we are as humans moving through the world, and also what corporations are doing. So that's a brief bit about me.
Thank you. William, let's move to you. Tell us about your background and your journey to getting to the Chief Product Officer.
Sure. Well, I think like a lot of folks here in product, I've had an unusual journey into product. I started as an analyst at a small student loan company in New York in the mid 2000s, which was really one of the pioneers in bringing consumer lending online and making the process of getting financing quick, fast, automated. From there, I went to work for a technology company in the education space that provided enrollment management software to university admissions offices and ran their operations and finances for a few years. At which point, the co-founder of the student loan company got back in touch with me and said, hey, there's a great opportunity, I think, in the mortgage space to go and apply the same kind of innovation that we had applied in student lending at my rich uncle. And so I joined him as part of the founding team at Better Mortgage, which today is probably the fastest growing mortgage company in the US. And from there, really kind of started getting into product. The great thing about startups is there's typically kind of a dearth of labor and hands to do work, and more opportunity than can be done by people on the ground. So I had a chance to really get into product there and helped launch our first product at Better. Spent 3 or 4 years there, at which point I actually set out and founded a company here in Richmond called Tridster, which was a title insurance and settlement service marketplace where we helped home buyers and homeowners refinancing home loans find savings with low-cost providers for title insurance and settlement services. And that company kind of made it a few feet off the ground, but didn't make it into escape velocity. And at the end of it, ended up joining up with West Creek, which is a really awesome, fast-growing financial technology company here in town.
Thank you. All right, Matt, you're up.
Yeah, so similar to William, kind of the winding path to product. So I've been at Capital One my entire career, 17 years, and I've done a number of different things ranging from kind of a general management role in the customer resiliency space, a strategy role focused in mobile, social, big operational roles, and most recently leading product and platform. The other interesting thing, and it was funny, Lori, at the beginning, you're like, hey, everyone knows what Capital One is. Like, the thing that I have often taken for granted is, having been at Capital One as long as I have, I've been able to be a part of the journey the company's gone through as well. And seeing it evolve from a credit card company to a bank to now a tech company that happens to be in banking is one that's been a fun journey, and also part of, I think, my own journey of having different experiences and kind of realizing over the course of those experiences that product and the multiple disciplines you get to engage with in the product space, design, customer, business, tech, was really like the role I was looking for the whole time, and had kind of glimpses of it throughout my time going back 10 years ago. But found through my journey, I was able to take just a number of different things from, in many cases where it wouldn't seem super relevant, and apply those to the role I'm in now in the product space.
Great. Well, thank you. All right. I think just like each of your journeys are very different, I think the role of head of product varies depending on your industry, your company size. So let's talk about what each of you does on a daily basis. Take us in the day in the life of your role. What are your responsibilities? What are your biggest challenges? All right, let's start with you, William.
Yeah, sure. And as Lori mentioned, I think product leadership roles are just highly contingent on the kind of industry you operate in, and also the maturity of the company. So, and I'll qualify everything that I say about my experience with that observation today, because it's specific, and product can mean a lot of different things. But I think some of the things that I do on a day-to-day basis are probably universal to other product leadership roles. I think one, clearly capturing business intent, right, from the executive team and really largely from the whole team, and just as clearly as as importantly as capturing it, interrogating business intent, right? Is this is what we think we should do. Is it actually what we should do? I think a lot, past that, a lot of day-to-day is triage, right? So a lot of competing priorities, production issues that come up that need urgent attention. And so just making sure that the team is balanced in terms of how we address issues and keep kind of consistent, persistent focus on net new product development is a kind of daily component of the job. And then I think lastly, just supporting the team, right? Like that's a really big piece of it, making sure that the product managers or other folks kind of getting work off the ground are supported and feel empowered. And I think the business of supporting them changes day to day depending on what folks are going through that day or what challenges they're dealing with. Lori, are we also touching on kind of biggest challenges as well here?
Yeah, sure. People want to know what are your biggest challenges right now?
Yeah, I think really the largest challenge I face, particularly in a fast growing startup is really hiring, right? I think when you're growing, what ends up differentiating truly great companies from companies that are okay, versus companies that don't make it, are the quality of folks that you're able to attract and retain on the team, and getting the best folks on the team is probably the biggest challenge that I deal with day in, day out in this role.
Thank you. All right, Matt, how about for you?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a piece of my role that I view as, like, I think the two most important things are, how am I setting and how is the team setting the vision? How are we continually reinforcing that? And we've talked through a lot, like this mantra of be incredibly inflexible in the vision and then flexible in the details of how to get there. So I think that's one of, like, hey, once you get to the vision, how are you continually reinforcing that at every turn, sharing that with stakeholders, using that to really influence and anchor where the team's going. The other, and William touched on this a little bit, and I'm super interested in, like, Milgo's point of view on this, I think is the team culture for me, and not just the team of product managers and how they're viewing their roles, how they're developing their teams, but how are we operating as a broader team between product, design, tech, our operational and intent partners? Because there's obviously a ton within diversity and inclusion, and I think, like, kind of the first, almost most basic layer of that in the product world is, how do you bring together those different disciplines to where everyone feels they've got a seat at the table, their voice is heard, they belong there. And that's ultimately going to shape that vision and shape that product or platform to be what it needs to be. So, like, I think about where I spend my time and energy. I think it's current vision, reinforcing it, the team, the culture, kind of the people leadership, and how the balance of that is going. And then in terms of challenges, for me currently, we're in a place with one of our big platforms, and really a couple of them, where we're multiple years into working toward our vision. And so it's that, okay, take a breath before you're done with it and figure out go multiple years out again, and what's that going to be. And in my experience, if you're doing that right, that takes time, because you're bringing all those diverse groups along to influence and shape, so that they feel ultimately far more accountable and compelled by where you land.
All right, thanks for that perspective. Milgo, interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, I would really reiterate a lot of that. Especially now that we're working in a very heavily remote environment. I know with many of our clients and in our business as a whole, it's been an interesting shift to be able to manage culture and help other companies manage culture, help them understand what they need in a digital capacity, compared to, actually, like, being there in a physical space, collaborating together, working together, and really taking the time to get to understand different groups of people is a whole different lift now. So that has been a really interesting challenge to solve. But I think in a lot of ways, it's been something that has been a great equalizer for some folks, for sure, to be able to get and reach different groups of people that, we may never have been able to reach before in the ways that we can now, and have that be such a speedy and easy access type of thing. But there's always balances to that, right? So, what is that work-life balance is a constant question that we always are running up against. And, what does that look like for the recommendations that we're making towards our clients, as well as to our own teams, is a huge piece in that. So from a day-to-day perspective, though, I think as far as product is concerned, it's really interesting to be working in a relatively small and boutique agency, where we've got, all different kinds of folks, but also all different kinds of expertise, right? And what does that look like from a product standpoint? Because we're also talking about a commodity as a human, just as much as we're talking about platforms as a commodity as well. So one of the things that, we've been really excited to launch this past year has been a whole series of online training that really also democratizes the ability for people to get engaged on topics of diversity and inclusion, and also understanding things like allyship and what does that mean for them. And that's been a really different experience for our company as a whole, especially, even I think back to when I joined, we were a very traditional consulting agency. So doing all of this stuff in the tangible physical world, not necessarily digital. And so over the time that I've been here, we've been transforming our company towards a more digitally focused company. And that's been really exciting to see, but also really intense, I think, in a lot of different kinds of ways.
All right. Thank you. Given this is such a broad role, and it varies so much from company to company, what do each of you think are the skill sets that are required to do this role that you have now? And I'm going to start with you, Matt, on this one.
I think there's a little bit of the jack of all trades, master of none, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you got to understand enough of design, enough of tech, enough of the business. I think everyone's going to have their relative spikes in there. I think there are three things that are pretty interesting in the product space. One, and one of the things I love about it, a continual desire and aptitude to learn. And even if someone didn't have that, the job forces them to have that because of changing technology, changing customer needs. And so for me, that general bias toward learning and like desire to really want to get in and learn and understand is huge. There's another one that, I was taking a note here as I think like William was talking, there's a decision-making element and knowing when to decide and go that is really, really critical. And I think what you see in a lot of more junior product managers, at least I've seen, is this almost kind of enlightenment of when they get into the role. First, they're like, oh man, this is hard. Like the way I view it, they've got a million and change, depending on the tech team investment that they're running, right? They're the final shot caller on it. And I think knowing when to stop the research, you've gotten the input from stakeholders, you got to make a call, you got to test, get something into market and go, and get the team behind that decision is a skill that's pretty critical as well, and one that is for me super fun to see people grow into and develop, because it's one of those things also that is a general leadership and management skill that I think is really critical as well, to be able to do it in a graceful and elegant way.
Thanks. Okay, Melga, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think, you have to really be considering what are all of the different kinds of lenses that I need to be aware of in order to make an effective decision, right? And that's something that we're always constantly evaluating and moving the target on. But especially like in our work and in the work that we're also helping a lot of companies with, understanding how to be a culturally competent and effective leader, as much as it relates to product, as it relates to everything that you're doing with your team, is so key in our work just as a whole. But how does that impact your end customer, and how can you actually be able to engage that person and also try to find ways to not cause them harm inadvertently? Especially, when we think about digital products, sometimes I think, we kind of miss that a little bit, especially when we're thinking about all of the different ways that something can impact a person. It can be really overwhelming, but figuring out what the right data is to focus on, the right lens, all of those different bits and pieces are super, super fundamental.
Thanks. Okay, William.
Yeah, so I think from my experience, communicating vision in a way that's both digestible and in a way that generates enthusiasm is a really critical piece of what I do day to day. I think working at a startup is hard. It's a lot of hours. There's a lot of to use a term I use often, a lot of brain damage associated with it, and you've got to be excited about what you're doing day to day for it to feel rewarding. And so I think a big thing that I need to do is kind of impart or help kind of generate enthusiasm. Persuasion is a pretty big one. Getting lots of different folks to come along, right, with an idea or a feature is a really critical skill. And then empathy. And I think this is something Milga touched on in different language, right? Like just making sure that you're using as many lenses, right, to understand what's going on, both within your organization, but and this kind of touches on something Matt says, and it's not so much a skill, I guess, as a like day-to-day requirement of the job, but just being kind of like really market oriented, right? Really kind of curious and focused on what's happening kind of in your space, right? Either your direct space, in our case as a point of sale financing provider, or in your category, right? Like we're a B2B2C company. So just understanding like, hey, what do kind of like exceptional businesses in this category do is really critical. And then kind of one specific thing that I'd note on, which is important for an early stage business, is in particular empathy with founders, right? I saw a really interesting chart the other day that showed the number of employee hire for the first product management hire at a number of large tech companies. It was like Google, Apple, Stripe, and these first product hires weren't happening until like almost the 100th employee hire in some cases like the 200th. And I think what that reflects is just a dynamic with a really strong founder influence on product, kind of at the beginning of a company's life cycle. And so I think, stepping into a product leadership role at an early stage company requires you to really generate a lot of empathy and sensitivity to founders who kind of almost treat, the company like it's their child.
All right, thank you. A lot of these are soft skills. You hear that and you get to these executive levels. So let's talk about how do people get these skills? It's not like you can go take a Python class and learn that hard skill. What do you recommend? What do you see people doing? There are effective ways to move up in the organization, and maybe even comment if you see anything that may be ineffective, things you see people doing that are tripping them up. And I'm going to start with Milgo on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's interesting for me thinking about this kind of stuff because, again, I never necessarily thought I was going to be doing this. This wasn't something that was painted a picture for me when I was a young child and saying, oh, yes, product, that is a thing that you can do. It was not that for me. I have family members that are scientists and educators and whatnot. And so the idea of being curious and taking kind of your own ego out of something is something that I grew up with, but also something that I believe very much in as far as being an effective product creator, just as much as someone who can be a supporting member to a team. So, the ability for us to be curious really helps us kind of push past some of these barriers that, may feel extra critical, or that the market is, kind of overwhelming, and all of a sudden we have to pivot and change and respond to all of the different data points at a different given time. But I think, when you can kind of try to build that into your practice, like early on, it really starts to become something that you become excited and re-engaged around. So more so than just thinking about the really practical, like hands-on skills of, here are all the different softwares you need to know and all that sort of stuff. If you can find ways to also continue to be curious, that is really difficult to continue to be able to consistently maintain over time. So figuring that out for yourself early and often is really key to that, in my opinion.
All right, thank you. William.
Hey, yeah, so, I kind of think of it like stepwise. One, I think just being consistent in, execution and delivery in whatever role you're in, right? That gets you a seat at the table, right? And it gets you respect from peers. And I think once you're at the table, right, like, how are you using your voice at the table, right? And I think, folks who come and who are curious and who bring informed, constructive perspectives, right, then grow reputations, right, as people you want to check in with, right, as you're making decisions, right? So I think, secondly, it's about what you bring to a conversation. And I think lastly, like once you have kind of established those couple of things, right, it's really your ability to kind of persuade folks, influence people around you, and follow through on things that you say you'll do. And I've seen that be a pretty potent recipe for being able to advance in the product, and really like in other functions as well.
Absolutely. All right, Matt.
I agree with William's points on the consistency, and then like ownership. I think it's often like incredibly underrated, and it's a really simple thing to do. The other things that pop to mind, and this is a little bit, Lori, what I've seen not work for folks. And there's like two things in here. One is detaching yourself from the product. And this one's a little bit of a double-edged sword, and could probably be an interesting debate on its own. But I think there's a credibility that comes with presenting your ideas and your product objectively, and detaching kind of your own feelings and worth from it, and being able to sit in a room of folks and hold up the idea, the concept, and really approach and debate it from a principle-based and data-backed perspective. I just think that leads to a far more constructive conversation, and also can help give you as the salesperson or owner of that a bit of credibility that you're viewing it from an unbiased kind of objective point of view. The other one that's a little bit related is how do you subordinate your agenda to the broader cause or vision or agenda? And I think that's where a lot of people can get tripped up in a big organization of like, hey, this is like my thing, and I'm going to go make my thing great. And they miss the connection points for the broader influence, or miss having the conversation of, hey, let's talk about where there's good intersection between our goals and our vision, and where us partnering, or at least being aware, is going to get to a way better outcome. And some of that gets to the like selflessness of it, or having the self-confidence, candidly, to be like, hey, if I help push the team for the greater good, ultimately that's me doing the right thing, and someone will recognize that. And I think that's a fault I often see in folks, like wanting to have their thing and push their thing.
Great. Some that I've seen that y'all haven't touched on are ways to get more exposure, is to do things like the product tank. I think, Jessica and Travis and the other co-organizers, you see them everywhere. They have over 1,200 people, I think, on their distribution. They have speakers every month. And I think I've been watching them, trying to learn about this product role, because it's so ambiguous. I want to learn everything I can. And that's all anybody's talking about is product. So I think just being part of organizations like that, I've heard to getting a good mentor, a good product manager, and having someone can mentor you is a good advice. All right, that's my
Another
perspective.
one is,
Huh?
sorry, no, I was going to say another one on this list is for exposure is it's hard to substitute trying to start your own company. It's just fantastic product exposure, right? You have to bring people along. You're really thinking about what you're offering to users and how it impacts a P&L, and you are kind of in the weeds on all of those things and getting full exposure to the entire kind of like product management decision-making stack in one go. So if you have the means to, starting your own company or joining one is a really great way to get kind of a rough and tumble intro into product.
Absolutely. All right.
There too, Lori, sorry, there's something there too of like, often the perspective or the growth opportunities for exposure or other things are going to be the little like extra things a leader in the organization or something that may pop up that it's going to be like an extracurricular on top of your day job. And like, I think being super open to saying yes to as many of those as possible, because they're easy, often they're really low risk, right? Like there's no expectation that you crush it. It's like, hey, great, this person's helping here. In my experience has been, a couple of those have really grown into pretty meaningful things that have helped me develop a ton. And so, a couple of years ago, I just kind of committed to, if I think I've got the bandwidth or could make it, and like, this is a slippery slope, right? Within reason, like don't grab all the things and like, kill yourself in the process. But oftentimes I think it's those little things that folks are like, well, like, I don't know, I don't see the direct path to what it's going to do for me. Like grab one, take those opportunities. Like those are often beautiful things that turn into really amazing learning opportunities and, the visibility to places and leaders you otherwise wouldn't get exposure to.
I totally agree with that one, Matt. Absolutely. I've heard that in every single one. This is probably the fifth CXO type propelling your career forward webinar I've done, and every single one of them has said, step outside your comfort zone, outside your job, take on, anytime somebody asks you to step up, do it. You don't know where it's going to lead you. It's going to get you exposure. You're going to learn something and people will notice. So absolutely. All right. Thank y'all for all of that. I am done with my questions. So I see so much going on in the chat box here. I'm going to turn it over to Travis and Jessica, and they're going to get to your questions now. All right, Travis, Jessica.
All right. I can jump on for the first one if everybody can hear me. I've been writing them down in my little notebook here. So let's see. We've got one from Diogo. This was near the beginning of the chat, near the beginning of the panel. How do you drive your vision and your team remotely? And I know, Milgo, you kind of touched on this a little bit and how that's changed, but I'd love to hear from you, from the three of you. What's changed? Many of you probably have a more remote job now. So, and your teams are going to be remote, probably connecting with them and building trust is harder. How have you navigated that in the last 8 months?
I'll take a stab at that one, at least to start. So we actually had been in a position to start making that transition prior to this year. So, knowing that we were working, increasingly farther and farther away from maybe our home base, and being able to really not necessarily let travel or different things like that slow down our operations, or the fact that our clients were in multi-states or different things like that slow down our ability to communicate effectively with them, when maybe sometimes a phone call or email just isn't going to do it, and it's tough. I mean, I think communication is tough, and I say that as a person who creates products around communication, and it's something that I think we need to spend time thinking about what the right avenues for that information needs to be, especially, depending on who the person receiving that information is as well. I think something that we've also seen so much in this last year has been really getting to have a better understanding of what different people are going through, and how that might be an obstacle that maybe is solvable, but also maybe just should be accommodated in the process of thinking about our team's well-being, how that factors into their work product, and thinking responsibly about how we create products as a whole that can help people facilitate that.
Yeah, I think it has been a challenge, definitely. And I think some of the things that we do, and this is just really tactical, we try and do as much kind of video-based communication as possible. We try and have, somewhat regular kind of remote, virtual happy hours or just general kind of like recreational time. And then I think the other thing that's important is just being inquiring, right, about how folks on your team are doing, being sensitive to challenges, even more so than you might normally be, to make sure that everybody knows, like, hey, we're still a team, we still care about each other. Has been kind of one thing that's really helpful in keeping everyone together, just making sure that everybody remembers, like, you know, the we're here as a team, and we're here to support one another. And yeah.
I feel like the one, hi Diogo. I'm assuming it's the same Diogo. I know, can't be that many.
Right.
I like the tactical stuff. I feel like you can, like the ceremonies, like you can kind of substitute those. The one thing I'll say is it's almost a one-to-one substitute, but it's like 150% effort to get like mental bandwidth wise and just like exhaustion to get to the same place that it's like, 100% to get to it in person. The thing and like part of your question was like, how do you think about the vision setting? For me, the vision stuff's way harder. Like it's way harder to have a really collaborative discussion, I think, where folks are like open. And then for me, so much of a vision is like that constant, like, hey, I see Milgo in the hallway or she's in early one morning. And I'm like, hey, like come in here. Like we just kind of debate about it in person. It's that impromptu conversation, or like Milgo comes in and is like, hey, like I was driving on the way in. I'm like, I had this insight. I think those are the things I worry that get lost. Yeah, it's tough though.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, Matt. Do you mind if I just follow up real quickly for the three of you? This is probably a pretty quick response. Have you seen a productivity change, better or worse, since remote work started? And maybe you all aren't doing full-time remote. I know Matt Briggs works at Capital One, and the Capital One has been a kind of a leader in remote work, but I don't know about West Creek and TMI. So I'd love to know, like, have you seen productivity changes? And if so, what have you done to sort of handle that?
Yeah, I think we've seen, certain parts of our business respond really well. For example, like our operations staff has responded really well. I think on the product front, it's been highly kind of individual. I think some people have responded and adapted really well, and others have struggled. So I haven't seen like I haven't seen a pattern. It's been really just one off, and I don't think I have enough data points to make an observation that you could draw insight from.
Yeah, our team has done an amazing job this past year dealing with all the things. So I really appreciate them and the work that they do and everything that they put into, the way that we're able to continue to service our clients and be able to continue to do great work together. But I know in terms of our business and our industry specifically, this past year has been, one hell of a roller coaster. We've gone from thinking like, okay, diversity, right? And then come June, everybody under the sun needs help with a little bit of everything. So it's been a very crazy year, and they've done phenomenally with that. So I couldn't be more proud.
Yeah, I like Milgo's gratitude toward her team resonates a ton. Like I am astounded every day by what the team's been able to do and the commitment. And I think if you look at it on paper, right, like our engineers are shipping just as much remotely. And I think, on paper, we're moving just as much product and deploying as much and moving through as much. I worry about the overall human effort and emotional drain that's behind that, because I think like all of, like, hey, anyone on this like in this discussion is like, you know, probably a little bit type A, like go getter, gonna make it work. And, you know, there's a period at which that tank dries up. And I think everyone, I mean, myself included, has been running at, again, like 150%. And so like objectively, it looks the same, but people are just, you know, getting worn out and having to work way harder to do it, given everything going on in the world and, you know, throughout work.
Interesting. Yeah, sustainability is, well, we'll see. I guess we're going to start seeing pretty soon. Jessica, I want to give you the opportunity. I know you've been writing down some questions as well. If you're there, feel free to jump in with the next one. Otherwise, I've got a next one, of course.
Cool. No, Susan put a great question in the chat, and we have been talking a lot about vision and making connections. So wanted to bring this one to the forefront. How do you each approach bringing or being a team with your marketing teams, platform team, and tech teams sort of across those different areas? Susan mentioned she's a platform product manager and often struggles to get the marketing and analyst groups to care about working on things like tech debt. So how do you approach that as a product leader?
Well, I can respond first. At West Creek, we've actually now organized those teams together. So I oversee our product team as well as our sales analytics team, as well as our small marketing team. And we literally all talk with one another every day. And I think it's been actually like a really serendipitous kind of combination, right? I think we're able to surface like lots of interesting insights from our merchant partners and customers, right, through our sales analytics team, which the product and marketing teams then kind of hear firsthand. Like the marketing folks know when product releases are going out because we're talking about them every day together. It's a luxury of being a smaller organization, but I think like I think that point really resonates. Like if you're able to organize those folks together, it helps to give you a lot more, I think, velocity and effectiveness with product releases.
I've seen it done a couple different, I've seen teams do hey, we'll carve out a percentage of time that is to be focused on tech debt from each team. My bias is that kind of masks or defers the real conversation that needs to happen, which is here are our shared objectives. The tech should be an enabler for those shared objectives. And at the end of the day, if you really stare at most, you know, tech debt in air quotes, if you don't address it within a certain amount of time, it's gonna, you know, you're just delaying the fuse on the bomb that's going to keep you from getting towards some of those objectives. And so I think putting in the hard work up front of, hey, we're all aligned, these are the things we're in for, kind of forcing the conversation around a single backlog that, hey, like you may not agree on every single thing that goes in there. And then the other piece, which I think is a fun aspect of the product manager role, you need to be really clear on who the decision maker is for the backlog, like hard stop. And that's not because, you know, the product manager is better or smarter. It's to bring some order to the mayhem of like, hey, especially in a unit that small, there needs to be one. And if they're doing their job really well, they're bringing their stakeholders and their teammates along. So I think, you know, reorient back to the vision for the sake of what, single decision making, and then, you know, clarity of the conversation on the trade-offs.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to that one, but I really do think that, you know, finding ways to integrate things across the board makes it a much easier approach than having to kind of do the weird Tetris dance of getting people back on the same page. You know, but that's also given it your ability to actually integrate things, right? So if things have to be separated, you know, what's the best, most effective way to help teams understand that vision together is a challenging question. And oftentimes I think a lot of it depends on what language you're speaking when you're talking between groups, right? So if one group is speaking about features and another is speaking about, customer impact, it might not be the same conversation, even though you're talking about essentially the same thing.
That's so true. We often talk at CarMax about being multilingual, depending on who your stakeholders are and which room you're in. Very, very cool. Travis, can I hand it back to you for one more question? And then Lori, at some point you're gonna have to cut us off, but we can keep going all day.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a question that Kelly asked, or I'm restating it. So Kelly, I hope this does the spirit of your question justice. But I think what she was asking is, what is how do you separate yourself from your team? And that's not a good way to put it. How do your day-to-day activities differ from those of your team? And how does that work to make the team work better? So in other words, from a tactical standpoint, what are you doing every day? What's your team doing every day? And how do those things work together to make a great product? And maybe Milgo, you could go first. I know you're kind of in an advisory role in many cases, but I'd love to hear your take on that, and then I'll ping it over to William and Matt as well.
Yeah, I think I have an interesting vantage point on that one. Mostly because I work with so many different groups of people, and the types of projects we're working on are very different sometimes. So sometimes it's more in the realm of like thinking about how to optimize humans, and other times it's how to optimize software or digital solutions to a human problem, which I think all of us are ultimately doing. But when it relates to human capital, there's a little bit of a legal spin on it too, that I think sometimes doesn't always come into play with some other fields quite in the same way. But I think, again, the biggest piece there is trying to figure out, what are we working towards in the long term? What are we looking at today? And then also, how is that going to change depending on all these different curveballs that might be happening at different points in time? I know, especially with our, the folks that are helping our clients on a day-to-day basis, they're helping them achieve really specific things, but they're also helping them look at, crisis situations that happen. Is there a potential technology solution to the thing that's occurring for that client? And how can our team help build that, or maybe help them find the solution, is sometimes also part of our role as consultants as well. So at least for me, what that means is trying to make sure that I'm keeping tabs on a lot of different kinds of things, while also lifting up the stuff that's most important or most relevant to a given obstacle, so that I can help my team achieve that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, not at all, please.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on what Migo was saying, triage is just kind of a core differentiated responsibility, just bringing perspective about kind of the universe of things that could or should be done, and making sure that focus is aligned on that. I find myself being the kind of decision maker of last resort as well. Something's really thorny or hairy, that's typically where I'm being asked to weigh in or help facilitate a decision. Just generally being a sounding board for ideas. And I think past being a sounding board, creating space for kind of folks to take risks in their thinking, is kind of a core piece of what I do. That's probably a little bit different than folks who are just actually focused on the specific business product challenge at hand.
I like the risk taking piece for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be anything you're doing that your team could be doing, you're robbing them of an opportunity. to learn, to grow, to do it themselves. I think the other thing is like figuring out and being really consistent with the ceremonies you set up to engage and get the information you need to just make sure you're aware, like you're comfortable what's going on, and then having something clear to tie that back to, like OKRs or a handful of, you know, few unambiguous outcomes that you're going for, and like partnering to set those, and then being like, to William's point, here you go. Like you tell me how you're going to get there. Like that's where I want to go. You know, you tell me if along the way you figure out we need to kind of go another different direction. But I don't know. I once heard an executive at Capital One say, you know, it was so funny. He was like, and he was like super senior, but he was like, I do nothing. He was like, literally, when you hit a certain level, like you should actually do nothing. Like you're just reinforcing the vision, helping set the vision, set the culture, and then solving problems, right? And so there's a little bit of in there of, you know, however you want to frame it, but yeah, I'd like to think we all view ourselves as working for our teams, but I think that's kind of one of those time-tested sayings that I've always found serves me really well to, you know, I'm working for them at some point, helping get stuff out of their way.
Really interesting. Really, really interesting. Anybody else? I don't know if Milgo and William and Matt, when you sort of talked, if it sparked any ideas, what other folks were saying, feel free to jump in. I mean, we don't have to go, you know, question down the line. So if something that Matt or William or Milgo says makes you want to kind of gives you a thought or something you'd like to share with the group, please don't hesitate to jump in. But if not, I can jump into one last question if you like, or Jessica, if you'd like to.
Yeah, Travis, I have one. I'm going to blend two questions if you all will allow me the creativity. So folks are wondering, we've heard a lot about hiring and coaching and working with your teams, particularly since we're talking about career discussions. What type of credit do you all give to product management, grad programs, certificates? I mean, you came to product through kind of what I'd call the school of hard knocks. You worked hard and found your way to head of product, and these things didn't exist until the last few years. What's your opinion on them? And just for sake of clarity, William, can we start with you?
Yeah, just to replay the question back to kind of like in the context of hiring, how do I think about product specific educational courses or certifications?
Yes, that sums it up.
Sure. So I think, you know, if I'm being completely honest, I actually don't have a great feel for like the world of product certification or education out there. And I think, like, you know, looking at a candidate or looking at a resume, like I'm really looking for, you know, do they have some experience in product management? You know, I think we're at a stage of growth where we're not necessarily taking on folks who haven't actually, like, you know, like done the craft right at all in probably a way that like Capital One, where, you know, is more, you know, open to kind of grooming folks who don't have that experience into that role. So I think, you know, mostly like we're looking for experience. And I think once you have experience, like it really comes down to, you know, what is the kind of engagement look like in the interview process? It's really like, how do you think? How do you problem solve? And I'd say like the majority of our, you know, candidate underwriting is really case driven, and just kind of like interpersonality driven. But I now have some homework to go and better understand these product certifications.
Thanks. We get these a lot through Product Tank RVA and folks just asking how to get started. So any opinions, I'm sure through LinkedIn or recommendations, you can pass them through Travis and I if you find a good one. Matt, what are your thoughts on this?
I think I'm with William. Like, I don't probably, I'll give you my point of view, but it's probably not like, I'm not qualified to do so because I should know more. I think I think to some degree, product management has been like romanticized as this ethereal, brand new, crazy unicorn job. Like, if you unpack unpack what it is. Like it's a bunch of pretty time-tested disciplines put together, which is awesome. But like, you know, product market fit, like that sounds a lot like some pretty basic economic principles that, you know, like have been around for a really long time. Technology obviously emerging, you know, design, care for your customer. So I think those, to answer it directly, I think they're great for folks to get exposure to what the job is, if they may be interested and get kind of the basics of the craft and like, all right, here's the lingo, here's what I should be doing. I don't think in any way, shape, or form it should be a prerequisite, because you might have someone, you may have folks who have much deeper learnings in each of those areas that are going to be way better suited. And while there are certainly some base hurdles to entry, you know, around like degrees and things like that, which are, you know, questions about that as well and how valid they are. Like, I'll take someone's passion for doing great work, learning, working with people. Yeah, I'll take that 9 times out of 10. Like, you can't teach the will for someone to want to do awesome things.
I think the audience appreciated that. We got a hashtag real talk.
+1, Matt, on that.
Milko, can you round us out with this?
Yeah, so as a person who has one of those,
Starting with you.
yeah, so as a person who has one of those, I would say that, like anything, you know, it really depends on what are you looking to get out of the experience, right? So if you're just thinking about it as you, a person who's a learner, right? What are you looking to achieve through that process, and what are your goals there? And also, what industry are you looking at? Because like, if we're talking about product, like that means a whole bunch of different kinds of things, depending on what industry or what kind of type of role you're interested in going towards. You know, but at the same time, on the flip side, like the hiring end, you know, I would really encourage folks who are at least in those programs or thinking about programs like that, as also, you know, really listening to what William and Matt have to say about that, because, you know, hands-on experience is just as valuable as anything that you're going to get through a course, if not more so, especially if that course is only focusing on kind of, you know, concepts versus actual hands-on learning and doing. But you don't necessarily have to be in a job, especially if there's anyone out there right now who's, you know, at the beginning of that stage or just thinking about this stuff, or maybe in a different field trying to transition into something else. Because I know for a lot of other folks that I know who have other kinds of certificates, they this was a really fast track for them to get from a completely different career track to this kind of career track. And so it was helpful for them in that capacity. But again, they were also thinking about what was that end goal they were trying to achieve through that whole process the whole time. So it's definitely a moving target. And a lot of these programs, you know, you're gonna want to do your research and figure out what feels like the best fit and get to know people who've been through them, especially if you're going to take the time to do the thing.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, so we've got a couple minutes left. I don't know if there's one big hot question. Well, it looks like we have a minute left, so we're going to probably just close this out. And please feel free to send out more questions. If you didn't get your answer, we'll try to get those answered for you through email or some form. Appreciate everybody being here. Thank you to Travis and Jessica for helping with this chat. This is the most chats we've ever had, I think, in one of these webinars, so I might sign y'all up for all of them. And thank you, Milko, William, and Matt, for your time and insights today. I think we have some more more product webinars coming up, different levels, different, yeah, I know Jessica's going to be on one of the panels, so check out our website. And I think, Travis, you wanted to plug a few things you have going on with the Product Tank before we say goodbye.
Yeah, I'd love to plug, we have lightning talks coming up. So what lightning talks are, they're short, brief, sort of product-focused presentations. Great for somebody who wants to start presenting or get experience presenting. This is going to be in November. So it's our next Product Tank. If you're interested in being part of our lightning talks, you want to present for 5 or 7 minutes, I think. Just get in touch with either myself or Jessica. You can get in touch with us via LinkedIn. And then we also have a number of events coming up later in the year that I really think you guys would find very interesting as well. So the easiest way to just sort of follow us is to go to our meetup page at Product Tank RVA and sign up, and you'll get all of the emails, and you'll get in the loop.
Great. Thank you. All right, everybody, have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you all.